Naomi Williams hurried through the streets of Greenwich, Connecticut, bracing herself against the chill of a gray morning. Her hands were buried deep in her worn-out coat, which barely kept out the biting winter wind. At 24, Naomi was no stranger to responsibility. She had been taking care of her sick grandmother and younger sister, Rachel, 15, ever since her parents died in a car accident. Life had never been easy, but the job as a maid in the wealthy town of Greenwich seemed like the only way to keep a roof over their heads. "Today's my first day at that mansion. I need this job," Naomi thought to herself as she rounded the final corner toward the lavish Harrington Mansion. The imposing structure, with its meticulously groomed gardens and wrought iron gates, seemed like something out of a different world, a world she had never truly felt welcome in. Upon arrival, Naomi was greeted by the housekeeper, Mrs. Keller, who led her through the house. The reverent silence of the wide, tastefully decorated hallways was interrupted only by the echo of their footsteps. Finally, the door opened to the grand living room, where Margaret Harrington sat. The woman, impeccably dressed in soft, light colors, regarded Naomi with cold disdain. "So, you're the new maid?" Margaret asked without rising from her chair, her voice dripping with condescension. "Yes, ma'am," Naomi replied, standing tall despite the discomfort that prickled under her skin. "I'm here to work." Margaret didn't bother to hide her disapproval as she gave Naomi a once-over, like she was examining a defective product. "I hope you do a better job than the last one." "She couldn't even keep the windows clean," Margaret said, shaking her head in distaste. "I'll do my best, ma'am," Naomi promised, holding back the urge to say more. This wasn't the first time she had been judged before even starting, and sadly, it wouldn't be the last. Naomi spent the entire morning cleaning every corner of the mansion. The kitchen, with its pristine marble countertops, was her first challenge. She scrubbed, polished, and organized everything according to the household's high standards. Then came the dining room chandeliers. It was meticulous work, but Naomi knew how important it was. As she worked, she could hear Margaret's sharp footsteps echoing in the distance, probably searching for something to criticize. Around noon, Naomi was finishing the grand sitting room when the door behind her suddenly swung open. "What is this?" Margaret's voice echoed through the room. Naomi turned, still holding the cloth she had been using to polish one of the gilded frames. "Ma'am," Margaret pointed to the floor, where a small speck of dust barely visible sat in the corner of the room. "That," Margaret exclaimed, her eyes flashing with irritation. "I do not expect dirt to be visible in this house. You should have caught that earlier." Naomi took a deep breath, trying to suppress the frustration rising in her throat. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll clean it right away." Margaret stared at her for a few more seconds, as if relishing the humiliation, before turning and walking out without another word. Naomi bowed her head for a moment, but quickly resumed her work, refusing to let the injustice break her. Later that day, when Naomi returned home, she was greeted by her grandmother, Mabel, a 70-year-old woman with a strong spirit despite her failing health. "How was your first day, dear?" Mabel asked, her voice soft and full of wisdom. Naomi forced a smile. "It was exhausting, but it's a job, right? They have high expectations, but I'll manage." "I know you will. You always have," Mabel replied, gently patting Naomi's hand. "Don't let them make you feel like you're less than you are." Naomi nodded, but deep down, she knew the days at the Harrington Mansion were going to be anything but easy. Still, she was determined to endure Margaret's disrespectful treatment, not out of pride, but because her family depended on her. And as painful as it was, Naomi understood that life would always demand more of her than of others. What she didn't realize yet was just how far those demands would go from that moment on. Naomi arrived at the mansion early on her second day, determined to keep her head down and get through the day without any confrontations. The Harrington Mansion, in the light of the morning sun, looked even more grandiose than it had the day before. The sheer size of the place still made her feel small, but she was used to being in spaces where she didn't quite belong. As she made her way through the front entrance, Mrs. Keller, the housekeeper, was waiting for her, holding a clipboard as usual. "Morning, Naomi," Mrs. Keller said, her tone businesslike but not unkind. "Good morning, Mrs. Keller," Naomi replied, trying to start the day on a good note. The family will be out for most of the day, Mrs. Keller explained as she checked off items on her list. Mr. Harrington has meetings in the city, and Mrs. Harrington will be at the club with her friends. I'll need you to focus on the upstairs bedrooms and the study today. Naomi nodded. I'll get right to it. As Naomi made her way up the grand staircase, she passed by the large windows overlooking the pristine garden. It was a different world from the one she knew, one filled with luxury, privilege, and a sense of entitlement that made her uneasy. She had barely reached the landing when she heard a voice behind her. Hey, wait up. Turning around, Naomi saw Lily Harrington, the Harrington's 16-year-old daughter, coming up the stairs. Lily was different from her parents, with a more relaxed attitude and a warm smile. Unlike Margaret, she didn't seem to carry the same air of superiority. You must be the new housekeeper. I'm Lily, the teenager said, offering her hand. Naomi hesitated for a second, but then shook it. Yeah, I'm Naomi, she replied, unsure how to react. Lily's friendliness felt genuine, but Naomi was cautious. She had learned not to trust too quickly. Lily gave her a curious look. I hope my mom hasn't been giving you too hard a time. Naomi wasn't sure how to answer that without getting into trouble, so she simply smiled. I'm managing. Lily sighed. I know how she can be. Just don't let her get to you, okay? Naomi appreciated the gesture, but it wasn't that simple. She had a job to do, and it didn't matter whether Margaret Harrington's words got to her or not. She had to endure them. I'll be fine, Naomi said, her voice steady. Thanks, though. Lily gave a sympathetic smile. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm around. Anyway, I'll let you get back to it. Naomi nodded, watching as Lily continued down the hall. She was struck by the contrast between mother and daughter. There was a kindness in Lily that Margaret seemed to lack entirely. Naomi didn't expect any kind of ally in this house, but perhaps Lily wasn't like the others. The rest of the morning went by in silence, with Naomi focused on cleaning the bedrooms, dusting off the furniture, and making the beds to perfection. Everything in the house was expensive, from the silk curtains to the ornate lamps on the bedside tables. As Naomi worked, she couldn't help but wonder what it was like to live in such luxury. Did it make people like Margaret feel invincible? Did it give them the right to treat others however they pleased? Around noon, Naomi was in the study, carefully dusting the bookshelves, when she heard the front door slam. Her heart skipped a beat. Margaret must be home. She hadn't expected her back so soon. Naomi! Margaret's voice echoed through the house, sharp and demanding. Naomi hurried downstairs, wiping her hands on her cleaning rag as she went. She found Margaret standing in the foyer, a frown already etched on her face. Yes, ma'am? Naomi asked, trying to keep her tone calm. Margaret glanced around the room, her eyes scanning for something, anything that she could point out as a flaw. Finally, her gaze landed on the vase of fresh flowers on the entryway table. Those flowers, Margaret began, her voice dripping with dissatisfaction. They're wilting. Why haven't you replaced them? Naomi blinked in surprise. The flowers looked perfectly fine to her, but arguing wasn't an option. I'll take care of it right away, ma'am, Naomi said quickly. Make sure you do, Margaret replied, her eyes narrowing. And the next time I see anything out of place, you'll hear about it. As Margaret turned on her heel and walked toward the dining room, Naomi let out a slow breath. No matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. Margaret would always find something to criticize, no matter how trivial. Naomi replaced the flowers, arranging them carefully in the vase, and returned to her cleaning. She knew she had to keep her composure, to not let Margaret's words sink in, but deep down, the constant belittling was starting to wear on her. By the time the day ended, Naomi was exhausted, both physically and mentally. As she walked home through the quiet streets of Greenwich, she replayed the events of the day in her mind. No matter how much effort she put into her work, it was clear that Margaret Harrington had already made up her mind about her. To Margaret, Naomi would always be beneath her, someone to look down on, someone to control. But Naomi had a family to take care of, and that meant she couldn't let herself be defeated. Not by Margaret, not by anyone. Naomi arrived early at the Harrington Mansion once again, determined to get through the day despite the emotional toll of the past few weeks. Winter still clung to Greenwich, and the cold outside seemed less biting than the chill she felt every day within the house. Her interactions with Margaret followed the same pattern: discontent, criticism, and a gaze that seemed to pierce through her, as if Naomi were invisible. She began her day as usual, organizing the living room, polishing the marble surfaces, aligning the velvet cushions, and making sure everything was perfect. Everything had to be perfect. Margaret was always waiting for a mistake, and Naomi didn't want to give her the satisfaction. By mid-morning, Naomi was vacuuming the grand staircase when she saw Margaret appear at the top of the stairs. The severe expression on her face made it clear that something was wrong. "Naomi, come here," Margaret commanded, her voice cold as the wind outside. Naomi turned off the vacuum and hurried up the stairs, bracing herself for whatever criticism was coming next. Margaret held a small velvet jewelry box in her hands. Naomi recognized it as one of the cases where the expensive jewelry was kept. Margaret's fingers gripped the box tightly, and the look on her face was pure judgment. "Did you clean the bedroom yesterday?" Margaret asked, her eyes locked on Naomi. "Yes, ma'am," Naomi replied, staying calm. "And this morning? Have you been in there yet?" "No, ma'am. I've been following the schedule Mrs. Keller gave me." Margaret took a deep breath, her eyes scrutinizing Naomi more closely. "One of my pieces of jewelry is missing." Naomi froze for a moment. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong, but the accusation was clear in Margaret's tone. "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am, but I didn't touch anything except for cleaning," Naomi responded, her voice steady and respectful. "You were the only one in the room yesterday," Margaret said, crossing her arms with an expression of disbelief. "And now the jewelry is gone. How do you explain that?" Naomi felt a chill run through her veins. There was no way to prove her innocence, but the insinuation of theft hung in the air like a thick fog. "I would never steal anything, ma'am," Naomi said, meeting Margaret's eyes without hesitation. "I came here to work honestly. I wouldn't touch anything that isn't part of my job." Margaret studied her for a few more seconds, the silence heavier than any direct accusation. Then, with a long, dramatic sigh, she slipped the jewelry box back into her coat pocket. "I hope you're telling the truth, because if I find out you're lying, the consequences will be severe," Margaret warned, turning to walk down the stairs with the same air of superiority she always carried. Once Margaret was gone, Naomi let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her thoughts raced in every direction. How could she defend herself against something like this? There was no one to witness her actions. It would be her word against Margaret's. And in Margaret Harrington's world, the word of a black maid meant very little. Later that day, while Naomi was tidying up the library, she was startled by Lily, who casually entered and flopped onto one of the armchairs. "Are you okay?" Lily asked, her tone familiar, as Naomi had come to expect from the teenager. Naomi hesitated for a moment. "I'm fine," she said, trying to keep her composure. "I heard my mom yelling upstairs." "I overheard," Lily said, her eyes studying Naomi. "She said something about a missing piece of jewelry?" Naomi nodded slowly. "She said a piece is missing. It seems like she thinks I stole it." Lily's eyes widened in surprise, though she didn't seem entirely shocked. "That's ridiculous. Of course you didn't take anything. I've seen my mom lose her temper over smaller things before. She's paranoid about that kind of stuff." Naomi forced a small smile, but the weight of the accusation still pressed on her chest. "Even so, it doesn't stop her from blaming me." Lily sighed, clearly feeling Naomi's discomfort. "I'll keep an eye on this. She can be difficult, but I know you didn't do it." Those words brought Naomi some relief, knowing that at least Lily believed her meant something. But Margaret was the one in charge, and in the end, Naomi knew that Lily's opinion wouldn't change her mother's decisions. "Thank you, Lily," Naomi said, grateful for the girl's sympathy, though still anxious about what might come next. "I'll try talking to her. Sometimes she needs to be reminded that the people working here are, well, people," Lily said with a warm, understanding smile. "I'll check on you later. Hang in there, Naomi." As Lily left the library, Naomi returned to her work, but the thought of the unfair accusation lingered in her mind. This was just the beginning, and Naomi could feel that Margaret was only waiting for the next opportunity to bring her down. Naomi woke up the next day with a deep sense of unease. Margaret's veiled accusation hung over her like a dark cloud, making her daily routine feel heavy. She tried to stay focused on her work, but the idea of being watched and judged with every step made her anxious. Naomi knew she needed to be extra careful today. There was no room for mistakes. When she arrived at the Harrington Mansion, she was greeted by Mrs. Keller, the housekeeper. "Good morning, Naomi," Mrs. Keller said, giving her a somewhat wary look. News of the missing jewelry had already spread among the staff, and Naomi could feel the whispers and suspicious glances following her. "Good morning, Mrs. Keller," Naomi replied, trying to remain composed. "Today, you'll be cleaning the guest rooms," Mrs. Keller instructed, handing Naomi the list of tasks for the day. "Mrs. Harrington is concerned. Make sure everything is done perfectly." Naomi nodded, though her stomach churned. She knew that concerned meant suspicious. Margaret wasn't just worried about the missing jewelry. She was watching Naomi, waiting for any slip-up. As Naomi cleaned the first guest room, she could feel Margaret's presence lurking, even though she hadn't seen her yet. Margaret was probably silently passing by, keeping a close eye on everything Naomi did. Every movement felt heavier, as if Margaret were waiting for Naomi to reveal herself as guilty. Later that morning, while Naomi was polishing a mirror, Margaret appeared in the doorway. "Did you find anything while you were cleaning today, Naomi?" Margaret asked, her tone sweet but with an underlying coldness. "No, ma'am," Naomi replied calmly, trying to mask her growing discomfort. "Just dust and a few things out of place." Margaret gave a small smile, but her eyes stayed sharp and untrusting. "Make sure that if you do find anything valuable, you bring it to me immediately." "Of course, ma'am." When Margaret finally left, Naomi exhaled slowly, her heart pounding. Something was off. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. Margaret was planning something. That afternoon, while Naomi was cleaning the living room, Lily walked in as she often did, her steps casual and carefree. "You look stressed," she commented, throwing herself onto one of the couches. Naomi paused for a moment, the cleaning cloth still in her hands. "I'm fine," she said, offering a weak smile. Lily narrowed her eyes, clearly not buying it. "She's still blaming you for that missing jewelry, isn't she?" Naomi sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. "She hasn't said it directly, but yes, she doesn't trust me." "That's so unfair," Lily shook her head, clearly upset. "I tried talking to her, but you know my mom. Once she decides something, no one can change her mind." Naomi nodded. "I appreciate you trying, Lily, but it won't change how she sees things." Lily glanced around the room as if deep in thought. "I know she hides things that might help clear all this up." Naomi frowned, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "My mom is obsessed with her jewelry. If something's missing, she probably knows exactly where it went. Maybe she moved it and forgot, or maybe, I don't know, but something feels off." Naomi looked at Lily, grateful for her support but unsure of what difference it would make. "Even if you find something, it's still my word against hers." "Maybe, but I'll try. I don't like how she's treating you." Before Naomi could respond, Mrs. Keller entered the room, giving Lily a disapproving look. "Come on, Lily. Let Naomi get back to work," Mrs. Keller said, clearly impatient. Lily got up from the couch, flashing Naomi a supportive smile. "I'll check on you later." Once they were alone again, Mrs. Keller approached Naomi, her voice low and filled with caution. "Be careful, Naomi. Mrs. Harrington is watching you." Naomi nodded, fully aware that this was a trap Margaret had been carefully setting. Each day was becoming more unbearable. At the end of the day, Naomi went to the supply closet to retrieve her belongings. As she opened the door, her heart stopped. There, tucked on a high shelf, was a small jewelry case, one that looked very much like the one Margaret had mentioned. She froze, her mind racing. How did this get here? She knew she hadn't touched it, but the mere fact that it was there could destroy everything. Just then, Margaret's cold voice cut through the air. "Naomi?" Naomi turned around slowly, her blood running cold. Margaret was standing in the doorway, her eyes locked onto the jewelry box. What are you doing with that? The air in the supply closet felt like it had frozen. Naomi stood in front of the shelf, staring at the jewelry box as if it were a ticking bomb. Margaret, with her rigid posture, stood in the doorway, her cold eyes fixed on Naomi like a predator eyeing its prey. I asked what you were doing with that, Naomi. Margaret's voice was firm, not raised but laden with hidden accusation. Naomi's heart raced as she swallowed hard. I don't know how it got here, ma'am. I was just getting my things when I saw the box. I swear, I never touched it. Margaret crossed her arms, her eyebrows arching in a practiced expression of skepticism. So you expect me to believe that, by coincidence, the missing jewelry ended up in the supply closet where no one else would have put it except you? I didn't put it here, ma'am, Naomi said, her voice shaking, but determined. I would never do something like this. I've never stolen anything in my life. Margaret took a step closer, her high heels echoing on the marble floor. Naomi, you've worked here for a while, and I'd like to believe you're an honest person. But you understand, don't you, how this situation looks? She pointed to the box on the shelf. You were alone in this room, and now here's the missing piece. The weight of Margaret's words seemed to press down harder with each syllable. Naomi knew she was in a delicate position. No explanation she gave would be enough to deflect Margaret's suspicions, because that was exactly what Margaret wanted, to corner Naomi in this way. I understand how this might look, ma'am, Naomi said, her voice trembling but resolute. But I'm not a thief. I never have been and never will be. Margaret tilted her head as if considering Naomi's words, but her eyes glinted with malice. If you were honest, Naomi, you'd have confessed. You'd have admitted your mistake and spared us this discomfort. Naomi was about to respond, but before she could, a different voice broke through. What's going on here? Lily appeared in the doorway, her eyes darting between her mother and Naomi. She spotted the small jewelry box on the shelf and frowned. Mom, why is the jewelry here? Lily asked, confused. Margaret turned, her expression softening slightly upon seeing her daughter, but still carrying a coldness. It seems our dear Naomi found it, dear. Strange, don't you think? Lily looked at Naomi, who was visibly nervous, then back at her mother. Naomi wouldn't do this. She's not a thief, Mom. Margaret smiled, but it wasn't a smile of sympathy. Lily, dear, you're young and don't understand how the world really works. Not everyone is what they seem, and some people, when they're in difficult situations, make the wrong decisions. Lily pressed her lips together, irritated. You're trying to frame her. I know you are. Now don't be dramatic, Lily, Margaret replied with a calmness that only seemed to make her daughter more upset. I'm just dealing with the facts. What facts? This seems like a setup. Lily was growing more agitated. If the jewelry was really missing, how did it end up here? It doesn't make sense. Naomi felt a glimmer of hope seeing Lily defend her, but the tension in the room remained thick. Margaret shot a warning look at her daughter. Lily, go to your room. This isn't something you should be concerned with. I'm not going anywhere, Lily shot back stubbornly. Not until you stop this. I'm going to prove Naomi is being wrongfully accused. The irritation in Margaret's eyes flared, but she maintained her composure. Prove whatever you want, dear. But until then, Naomi will be suspended from her duties. I can't risk having anything else go missing. Naomi, who had been trying to keep her composure, felt her world collapse. Suspended? Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Yes, Margaret said coldly. You cannot work here while there is doubt about you. For now, you must leave. We'll discuss what to do next later. Lily, furious, moved closer to her mother. This isn't fair. You know she didn't do this. Go to your room, Lily, Margaret repeated, her tone now stern. Naomi didn't know what to do. Tears started forming in her eyes, but she couldn't let herself cry. Not in front of Margaret. Not with such a cruel accusation hanging over her. She slowly turned, grabbed her bag, and started walking toward the door. I'll find out what really happened, Lily whispered to Naomi before she left. Naomi only nodded, grateful but aware that her situation was becoming increasingly desperate. Naomi returned to her small house feeling defeated and alone. The streets seemed darker than ever, and the weight of Margaret's accusations felt almost unbearable. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, her mind swirling with confusion and worry about her son's future. Meanwhile, at Harrington Mansion, Margaret was in her office, reviewing papers with a worried expression. The tension between her and Lily was escalating, and Margaret knew she needed to handle the situation carefully. She didn't want things to spiral out of control, especially now that Lily was becoming more insistent. The next morning, Lily decided to take matters into her own hands. Determined to clear Naomi's name and solve the mystery of the missing jewelry, she began her investigation. First, she sifted through the house's records, reviewing employee schedules and any other clues that might help her. She was in the mansion's library, poring over documents and notes, when Mrs. Keller walked in. "Are you still here, Lily?" Mrs. Keller asked, looking at the young woman with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Your mother is looking for you." "I'm busy, Mrs. Keller," Lily replied, not looking up from the papers. "I need to figure something important out." "I hope it's for a good reason," Mrs. Keller said, a note of caution in her voice. "I don't want you to get into trouble." "I'm not getting into trouble," Lily said. "I'm trying to correct an injustice. Naomi didn't do anything wrong." Mrs. Keller sighed. "Well, if you think you can help, good luck. But remember, your mother won't be pleased." "I know," Lily said, "but I have to do what's right." Later, Lily went to the garden to speak with Tom, the gardener who had a good view of the mansion's surroundings. Tom was working in the garden when she approached. "Hi, Tom," Lily said, trying to sound casual. "Have you noticed anything strange lately? Anything out of the ordinary?" Tom, a middle-aged man with a friendly demeanor, stopped working and looked at Lily. "Strange? Well, now that you mention it, I did see some unusual activity. But it was just employees coming and going, nothing too notable. But did you see anyone who shouldn't have been here?" Lily pressed. "Anything unusual?" Tom thought for a moment. "Actually, now that you mention it, I did see someone I didn't recognize wandering around the mansion. It was a woman, not one of the regular staff. She was wearing a red dress and seemed to be looking for something." Lily frowned. "Do you remember when you saw this woman?" "It was 2 days ago in the afternoon," Tom replied. "She was leaving one of the service areas." Lily thanked Tom and began to piece together the clues. The woman in the red dress seemed to be an important lead. If she was wandering around the mansion without permission, she might know something about the missing jewelry. That evening, Lily visited Naomi's home to talk and gather more information. Naomi welcomed her with a tired but hopeful look. "Lily, what are you doing here?" Naomi asked, surprised. "I'm here to help," Lily said as she entered the house. "I've found some information that might be important." Lily began to explain what she had discovered. "I saw a strange woman at the mansion. Tom, the gardener, saw her in the service area. She was wearing a red dress and seemed to be looking for something." Naomi raised an eyebrow, thoughtful. "A woman in a red dress? That's interesting. I don't know anyone like that." "Neither do I," Lily agreed. "But maybe we can find some clues. Maybe she left something behind." "Do you think this woman might be involved?" Naomi asked, beginning to feel a glimmer of hope. "It's a possibility," Lily said. "We need to investigate further. She might have left behind a clue." Naomi and Lily spent the night making plans and reviewing all the available information. The mystery of the missing jewelry was far from resolved, but at least now there was a new direction to follow. Lily was determined to help Naomi, and Naomi, in turn, was eager to clear her name and uncover the truth. As the night wore on, both felt more hopeful, ready to face whatever it took to bring justice. The next morning, the mansion was abuzz with activity as preparations for a grand event were underway. Staff members moved briskly, setting up decorations and arranging tables. Lily was already at work, her determination to find the truth evident in her focused demeanor. Lily found Mrs. Keller in the kitchen, arranging flowers and vases. "Mrs. Keller," Lily said, approaching her, "I need to ask you something." Mrs. Keller looked up, her expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Yes, Lily? What's going on?" "I need your help with something," Lily said. "I've been investigating the missing jewelry, and I found out about a woman in a red dress. I believe she might have some connection to the case." Mrs. Keller's face grew serious. A woman in a red dress? I didn't see anyone like that. Lily nodded. Tom, the gardener, saw her around the service areas 2 days ago. I think she might be involved. Mrs. Keller's gaze softened slightly. Well, if you think it's important, I'll keep an eye out. But be careful. Your mother isn't pleased with you poking around. I know, Lily said, but I have to do this. Later that day, Lily decided to follow up on her lead. She approached Tom again, who was working near the garden shed. Hi, Tom, Lily greeted him. I was wondering if you could tell me more about that woman you saw. Do you know if she came back? Tom looked up from his work, wiping sweat from his brow. I haven't seen her since, but I remember she was acting suspiciously. She was peeking into windows and seemed really intent on something. Did she seem like she was trying to hide from anyone? Lily asked. Tom nodded. Yeah, she kept looking over her shoulder, like she didn't want to be seen. If I were you, I'd be careful. She might be up to no good. Meanwhile, Naomi was at home, feeling the weight of her suspension. She had spent the morning reviewing her own notes, trying to piece together any possible connections. Her phone rang, breaking her concentration. It was Lily. Naomi, it's Lily, the voice on the other end said. I have some new information. I think I found a clue that could help clear your name. Naomi sat up, her heart racing. What is it? There's a woman in a red dress who was seen around the mansion, Lily explained. Tom the gardener saw her acting suspiciously near the service areas. I think she might be involved in the theft. Naomi's hope flickered. That's a good lead. Do you know where I might find her? I'm not sure, Lily admitted, but I'm going to keep looking. I think if we can find her, we might get some answers. Thank you, Lily, Naomi said, her voice filled with gratitude. I'm counting on you. As Lily hung up, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She needed to find this woman and figure out what she knew. Determined, she started by checking local businesses and asking around the neighborhood, hoping to get a lead on the mysterious woman. By late afternoon, Lily had gathered some useful information. A local shopkeeper had seen a woman in a red dress who had visited his store recently, buying supplies. The shopkeeper remembered her because of her unusual appearance and mannerisms. Lily took note of the shopkeeper's description and thanked him. Armed with this new information, she headed out to track down the woman in the red dress. As dusk fell, Lily arrived at a small apartment complex on the outskirts of town. According to the shopkeeper, this was where the woman had been heading. With a mix of apprehension and determination, Lily approached the building. She found the apartment number and knocked on the door. After a few moments, the door creaked open, and a woman in her early 30s, dressed in a red dress, appeared. Her face was guarded, but there was a hint of recognition in her eyes. Can I help you? The woman asked, her voice cautious. Lily took a deep breath. Hi, I'm Lily Harrington. I'm investigating the disappearance of a piece of jewelry from our family's mansion. I understand you were seen around the mansion recently. The woman's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly composed herself. I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't been to the mansion. Please, Lily said, her voice pleading. I'm just trying to find out the truth. If you know anything, you need to tell me. The woman hesitated, then sighed. All right, I was at the mansion, but I was looking for a friend who used to work there. I didn't steal anything. I'm just trying to find someone. Lily's heart raced. Who's your friend? The woman looked away. Her name is Emily. She was a housekeeper there before she disappeared. I was hoping to find her and see if she's okay. Lily's mind was racing. Emily? I know her. She was dismissed recently. Maybe she can help us understand what happened. The woman's eyes filled with relief. If you can find Emily, please tell her I'm looking for her. I just want to make sure she's safe. With this new lead, Lily felt a surge of hope. She thanked the woman and hurried back to the mansion, eager to follow up on the information. If Emily was indeed connected to the missing jewelry, finding her could be the key to solving the mystery and clearing Naomi's name. The following morning, the mansion was quieter than usual. The excitement of the grand event had given way to a sense of uneasy anticipation. Lily had spent the night tracking down leads and was determined to get to the bottom of the mystery. Her next step was to locate Emily, the former housekeeper who might hold the key to unraveling the case. As Lily arrived at the mansion, she was greeted by Mrs. Keller in the kitchen. Good morning, Lily, Mrs. Keller said, looking up from her work. "What's the plan today?" "I'm going to try and find Emily," Lily said firmly. "She might have information about the missing jewelry." Mrs. Keller's expression softened. "If you find her, let me know. I'll help however I can. Naomi deserves to have her name cleared." "Thank you, Mrs. Keller," Lily said gratefully. "I'll keep you updated." Lily started her search by checking with local employment agencies and contacting former colleagues of Emily. After a few hours of investigation, she finally got a lead. Emily had been seen working at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Determined, Lily drove to the cafe, a quaint little place with a cozy atmosphere. She walked in and approached the counter where Emily was working. "Excuse me, Emily?" Lily asked tentatively. Emily looked up, her face a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "I'm Lily Harrington," Lily introduced herself. "I'm investigating the missing jewelry from the mansion. I believe you might have some information that could help." Emily's expression turned guarded. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I understand this might be difficult," Lily said, "but I need to clear Naomi's name. I was told you might know something about the situation." Emily sighed, wiping her hands on a towel. "All right, I'll tell you what I know, but it's not going to be easy to hear." Emily led Lily to a small, quiet corner of the cafe where they could talk more privately. "I was let go from the mansion because of some mistakes," Emily began, "but I was always trying to do my best. After I left, I heard rumors about the jewelry. It was supposed to be sold to cover some debts." Lily's eyes widened. "Sold? Do you know who was involved?" Emily nodded. "I overheard Margaret talking about needing money and looking for ways to sell some of the valuable items. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now it makes sense." "So, you think Margaret might be involved in the theft?" Lily asked, trying to process the new information. "It's a possibility," Emily said, "but I can't be sure. I didn't see anything directly." Lily took a deep breath. "Thank you for telling me. I think this information will be crucial in solving the case." With Emily's testimony in hand, Lily returned to the mansion. She was met by Naomi, who was anxiously waiting for news. "I found Emily," Lily said, "and she gave me some important information. She mentioned that Margaret might have been involved in planning to sell the missing jewelry." Naomi's eyes widened in shock. "Margaret? I never would have suspected, but it makes sense if she was desperate for money." "We need to confront her," Lily said, her voice resolute. "If she's involved, she needs to be held accountable." Naomi nodded, determination setting in. "Let's do it. I want to clear my name and make sure the truth comes out." As evening approached, Lily and Naomi decided to confront Margaret. They found her in her study, a tense expression on her face as she worked through her papers. "Margaret," Lily said, stepping into the room, "we need to talk." Margaret looked up, her face a mask of feigned surprise. "What's going on?" "We've been investigating the missing jewelry," Naomi said, her voice steady, "and we've uncovered some troubling information." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "What kind of information?" Lily took a deep breath. "Emily, the former housekeeper, mentioned that you were looking to sell valuable items to cover debts. We believe this might be connected to the missing jewelry." Margaret's expression shifted from surprise to a defensive glare. "This is absurd. I don't know where you got such ridiculous ideas." Emily's information was corroborated, Naomi said, her voice firm. "We have reason to believe you're involved." Margaret's face flushed with anger. "How dare you accuse me? I've done nothing wrong." "We have enough to take this to the authorities," Lily said, her tone unwavering. "If you're innocent, you'll have nothing to worry about. But if you're involved, you'll be held accountable." Margaret's eyes darted between Lily and Naomi, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "Fine. If you think you're so clever, do what you must." With Margaret's reaction confirming their suspicions, Lily and Naomi prepared to take their evidence to the authorities. The mystery of the missing jewelry was beginning to unravel, and justice seemed within reach. As they made their way to the local police station, both felt a mixture of relief and anticipation, knowing that the truth was finally coming to light. The next morning, Lily and Naomi stood outside the local police station, their faces etched with determination. They had gathered all the evidence they could find, and were ready to present it to the authorities. The air was crisp, and the sky was clear, reflecting the hope they felt inside. Inside the station, they were greeted by Officer Davis, a seasoned detective known for his fair and thorough investigations. He led them to his office and listened attentively as Lily and Naomi laid out their case. "Good morning, Officer Davis," Lily began. "We have some new information regarding the missing jewelry from the Harrington Mansion." Officer Davis nodded, motioning for them to continue. "I'm listening. What have you got?" Naomi took a deep breath. "We've spoken to Emily, a former housekeeper at the mansion. She revealed that Margaret Harrington might be involved in planning to sell the jewelry to cover her debts." Officer Davis raised an eyebrow. "Margaret Harrington? That's a serious accusation. Do you have any evidence to back this up?" Lily handed over the notes and statements they had collected, including Emily's testimony and the shopkeeper's account of the woman in the red dress. "We also have information that Margaret was desperate for money," Lily said. "Emily mentioned overhearing Margaret talking about selling valuable items. We believe this connects to the missing jewelry." Officer Davis reviewed the documents carefully. "I'll need to investigate this further, but it's important to remember that accusations alone aren't enough. We need solid evidence to move forward." "I understand," Naomi said. "We're prepared to cooperate fully. We just want to clear my name and get to the truth." Later that day, Officer Davis and his team began their investigation. They interviewed Margaret and reviewed the evidence presented by Lily and Naomi. Margaret remained defiant, maintaining her innocence and insisting that the accusations were baseless. In the meantime, Lily and Naomi waited anxiously at Naomi's house, discussing the next steps. The tension was palpable as they wondered how the investigation would unfold. "I hope Officer Davis finds something," Naomi said, pacing the room. "I just want this nightmare to be over." "I'm sure he will," Lily reassured her. "We have strong evidence, and the truth will come out." By late afternoon, Officer Davis returned to update Lily and Naomi on the progress of the investigation. "We've interviewed Margaret and reviewed the evidence," Officer Davis said, his expression serious. "She's been very defensive, but we found some inconsistencies in her statements. We also located the woman in the red dress. She's been identified as a known associate of Margaret." Naomi's eyes widened. "So, you think Margaret is involved?" "It's looking that way," Officer Davis confirmed. "We've also found some financial records linking Margaret to recent large transactions. It seems she might have been planning to sell the jewelry." Lily let out a sigh of relief. "That's good news. What happens next?" "We'll need to gather more concrete evidence and verify all the details," Officer Davis explained. "But we're moving forward with the investigation. Margaret will be questioned further, and we'll pursue any leads we find." Naomi nodded, a mix of relief and apprehension on her face. "Thank you, Officer Davis. We appreciate all your help." As the evening approached, Lily and Naomi felt a sense of cautious optimism. The investigation was progressing, and they were one step closer to uncovering the truth. They knew there was still a long way to go, but for the first time in a while, there was a glimmer of hope that justice would be served. Lily looked at Naomi with a reassuring smile. "We're making progress. Just hang in there a little longer." Naomi nodded, her expression filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Lily. I couldn't have done this without you." As they prepared for the next phase of the investigation, both women felt a renewed sense of determination. The truth was coming to light, and they were ready to see it through to the end. The following morning, the atmosphere at the mansion was tense. Lily and Naomi were anxiously awaiting updates from Officer Davis. They knew that today might be the turning point in their quest for justice. Lily was at Naomi's house when her phone rang. It was Officer Davis. "Hello, Officer Davis," Lily answered, her voice tinged with anticipation. "Do you have any news?" "Yes, Lily," Davis said. "We've made some significant progress. We've gathered additional evidence and are now ready to take the next steps." "Great," Lily replied. "What's the plan?" "We'll be confronting Margaret with our findings," Davis explained. "We've scheduled a meeting at the mansion to present the evidence and give her a chance to respond. I'd like you and Naomi to be present." At the mansion, Lily and Naomi arrived early, their nerves on edge. The grand hall, usually a place of opulence and tranquility, felt heavy with the weight of the upcoming confrontation. Officer Davis and his team were already there, preparing for the meeting. Margaret Harrington entered the room with an air of confidence, her demeanor a stark contrast to the tension in the room. "Margaret," Davis began, "thank you for meeting with us. We have some important matters to discuss regarding the missing jewelry." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "I'm aware. I've been waiting to hear what new accusations you have." Davis took out the evidence and laid it on the table. "We've reviewed the financial records and interviewed several people. The evidence suggests that you might be involved in planning to sell the jewelry." Margaret's face flushed with anger. "This is preposterous. I have nothing to do with this." Naomi stepped forward, her voice steady. "Margaret, we know about your financial troubles and the recent large transactions. Emily, the former housekeeper, told us you were desperate for money and looking to sell valuable items." Margaret's composure began to crack. "Emily? That's just hearsay. You have no concrete proof." Lily interjected. "We also found that the woman in the red dress, who was seen around the mansion, is an associate of yours. Her involvement further links you to the theft." Margaret's expression shifted from defiance to a mixture of guilt and frustration. "Fine. You've cornered me. I was in a difficult situation, but I didn't steal the jewelry. I was just trying to find a way out of my financial problems." Davis remained calm. "Margaret, it's important to be truthful now. If you didn't steal the jewelry, who do you think might have?" Margaret hesitated, her eyes darting around the room. "I don't know. I was desperate, but I never intended to get caught up in this mess. The real thief must be someone else." Naomi's eyes widened. "If you're telling the truth, then who could it be?" Margaret's silence was a heavy weight in the room. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "There were people who knew about my situation. I can't say for sure who might have taken advantage of it, but I suspect someone with insider knowledge." The conversation left Lily and Naomi with more questions than answers. As Margaret was escorted out by Officer Davis, they were left to ponder the next steps. "Do you think she was telling the truth?" Naomi asked, her voice filled with concern. "It's hard to say," Lily replied. "She's definitely hiding something, but she might not be the mastermind. We need to dig deeper and find out who else could be involved." Davis returned to the room. "We'll continue the investigation and follow up on the new leads. Margaret's involvement, or lack thereof, will be further examined." "Thank you, Officer Davis," Lily said. "We'll stay in touch and provide any additional information we can." As Lily and Naomi left the mansion, they knew they were getting closer to uncovering the truth. The investigation was far from over, but they were one step closer to finding the real culprit and clearing Naomi's name. The days that followed the confrontation with Margaret were filled with a renewed sense of urgency. Lily and Naomi were eager to find the real culprit behind the missing jewelry. Officer Davis and his team were following up on new leads, but progress was slow. Meanwhile, Naomi tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy in her life, though the weight of the ongoing investigation was a constant burden. One morning, as Lily and Naomi were having coffee at Naomi's house, Lily's phone rang. It was Officer Davis. "Hello, Officer Davis," Lily answered, her heart racing. "Lily, we've made a breakthrough," Davis said. "I think we found something that could be crucial to solving this case. Can you and Naomi come down to the station?" "Of course," Lily replied. "We'll be there shortly." At the police station, Davis greeted them with a serious but hopeful expression. He led them to his office, where he had spread out a collection of documents and photographs. "Here's what we've found," Davis said. "We've been investigating the connections Margaret mentioned and cross-referencing with other leads. One name kept coming up, Daniel West, a former employee who had access to the mansion." Naomi frowned. "Daniel West? I don't remember him." "He worked in maintenance," Davis explained. "He was let go a few months ago under suspicious circumstances. We've discovered that he had significant financial troubles and was seen near the mansion around the time the jewelry went missing." Lily's eyes widened. "So, you think he might be the one behind the theft?" "It's looking that way," Davis confirmed. "We've also found evidence that he might have been selling items on the black market. We're currently tracking down his whereabouts." Naomi's face was a mix of relief and anxiety. If Daniel is involved, it could mean Margaret's role was more about desperation than direct involvement. Later that day, Davis called Lily and Naomi to inform them that Daniel West had been located and was in custody. They were invited to the station for a formal interrogation. Lily and Naomi arrived, their hopes high but tempered by the knowledge that there were still many unknowns. In the interrogation room, Daniel sat nervously at the table, his hands fidgeting. Officer Davis and Lily stood on one side, while Naomi took a seat across from him. "Daniel West," Davis began, "we have evidence linking you to the missing jewelry from the Harrington Mansion. How do you respond to these allegations?" Daniel looked up, his face pale. "I didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. I was desperate for money and I made some bad choices." Naomi's voice was steady. "Why target the Harrington Mansion? What did you do with the jewelry?" Daniel sighed heavily. "I knew the mansion had valuable items. I thought if I could take just one piece and sell it, I could get enough to pay off my debts. I didn't realize how serious it would become." Lily leaned in. "Where is the jewelry now?" "I sold it to a dealer," Daniel admitted. "I don't know who the dealer is, but I can tell you where I met him." With Daniel's confession, Lily and Davis quickly moved to track down the dealer. By the end of the day, they had located the stolen jewelry and recovered it. Naomi felt a deep sense of relief as the pieces were returned to their rightful place. As the sun set over the mansion, Lily and Naomi stood together in the grand hall, now quiet and serene. "Thank you, Lily," Naomi said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you." "It was a team effort," Lily replied with a smile. "I'm just glad we were able to find the truth." Naomi's face softened with a look of contentment. "It's been a long journey, but it feels like a weight has been lifted." As the investigation drew to a close, Naomi prepared to return to her normal life, now free from the shadow of suspicion. Lily reflected on the case, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that justice had been served. The mansion, once a place of turmoil, was now a symbol of resilience and truth. With the stolen jewelry recovered and the real culprit identified, Lily and Naomi were ready to move forward, knowing they had uncovered the truth and restored peace to their lives. With the jewelry recovered and Daniel West behind bars, the Harrington Mansion began to regain its former calm. Naomi was finally free from the shadow of suspicion, and the weight of the past few weeks was starting to lift. The mansion, which had once been a place of tension and unease, now buzzed with a renewed sense of normalcy and hope. Lily and Naomi met in the mansion's library, a room that had become a sanctuary for Naomi during the investigation. The room was filled with light from the large windows, casting a warm glow on the rows of books and elegant furnishings. "Lily, I can't thank you enough," Naomi said, her voice filled with sincere gratitude. "You've been a true friend through all of this." Lily smiled warmly. "It was my pleasure, Naomi. I'm just glad we were able to clear your name and get to the bottom of what really happened." "I still can't believe it was Daniel," Naomi said, shaking her head. "I thought I knew everyone who worked here. It's unsettling to think someone so close could be involved in something like this." "I know," Lily agreed, "but sometimes people surprise us. The important thing is that the truth came out and the jewelry was returned. You can finally put this behind you." Later that week, the mansion hosted a small gathering to celebrate the return of the stolen jewelry and to honor those who had helped in the investigation. Mrs. Keller and other staff members were present, along with a few close friends and family. Naomi stood in the grand hall, where the recovered jewelry was displayed in a secure glass case. She looked around at the faces of those who had supported her throughout the ordeal. "Thank you all for being here," Naomi began, addressing the gathered guests. "This has been an incredibly challenging time, but your support and belief in me have made all the difference." Mrs. Keller approached Naomi with a warm smile. "I'm so glad everything worked out. You've shown great strength and resilience. We're all very proud of you." Naomi nodded, her eyes misting with emotion. "Thank you, Mrs. Keller. Your kindness and support have meant so much to me." Lily joined the conversation, holding a glass of champagne. "Here's to Naomi, to justice, and to moving forward." The guests raised their glasses in a toast, their voices blending in a chorus of agreement. "To Naomi." As the evening progressed, Lily and Naomi found a quiet corner of the garden to talk privately. The setting sun cast a golden light over the manicured grounds, creating a serene backdrop for their conversation. "Have you decided what's next for you, Naomi?" Lily asked gently. "Now that things have settled down?" Naomi took a deep breath, a sense of peace washing over her. "I'm thinking about taking a break and traveling for a while. I need some time to reflect and recharge. But I'm also excited about the future and what it holds." "That sounds wonderful," Lily said, her eyes brightening. "You deserve some time to yourself after everything that's happened." Naomi smiled. "And what about you, Lily? What's next for you?" "I'm going to continue working on my cases," Lily replied. "There's always more to uncover and more people who need help. But I'm also looking forward to taking some time to relax and enjoy life." As night fell, the mansion was filled with a sense of closure and optimism. The Grand Hall, now a symbol of triumph and recovery, was a testament to the resilience and strength of those who had faced adversity. Lily and Naomi walked through the gardens, their conversation light and filled with laughter. They were grateful for the journey they had shared and the friendship that had grown from it. "Thank you for everything, Lily," Naomi said as they reached the gate. "I couldn't have done this without you." "And thank you for trusting me," Lily replied. "I'm glad I could be here for you." As they said their goodbyes, both women felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The story of the stolen jewelry had come to a close, but the bonds of friendship and the lessons learned would endure. They parted ways with hope in their hearts, ready to embrace the new beginnings that lay ahead.